Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today I want to talk about KD couplers, the little things that hold your trains together. So if you're interested in ways to fine-tune them so that they'll operate reliably for you all of the time, stick around for the rest of the video. Okay, before we get started, I want to ask you to take a second to subscribe. Click on the subscribe box, and when that comes up, click on the little bell right next to it and click all. That way you'll be notified every time that I upload a new video. Okay, what I want to do now is focus down on the workbench so that I can give you a look at different types of KD coupler mounting mechanisms, both the US kind and the type used in the UK. So let me focus down here and we'll get started on this. Okay, so like I said, let's take a look at some of the different mechanisms for mounting couplers. Now, for many years, the standard was this type of clip system that Athern used on their cars. It's a little metal clip that just fits over the mounting box, and the coupler sits in it. And one of the problems with these is it's literally just a small mounting clip. And these tend to get deformed over time. And they, as you can see from this one, they can get kind of rusty. And all that can interfere with your operations. Now, one thing that can happen, and this goes back to using coupler picks, is over time, with constant pressure of people pushing down on these to uncouple cars, these tend to pop off eventually. And you know, during operating sessions, it's not unusual to have to fix 2 or 3 cars where people have knocked the couplers off. These are on pretty tight. I try to go ahead and install them very, very tight and squeeze them down before doing that. And it's fairly straightforward because these things, you know, they're just basically a small U-shaped device, and you can just take a pair of needle nose pliers or a pair of hemostats, and you can just literally bend these in just a little bit from the sides like that, and they'll grip a lot tighter. So that's one thing I recommend you doing. Another thing, there's a company out there, and I don't know exactly who it is. I haven't tried this, but they sell a small drill and threading device so that you can put a screw here in place of it's just a little plastic centering pin that is located here. But if you put a screw through here, those things are not going to come loose. Okay, so that's the typical Athern old mounting system. Another mounting system that Athern has used is this plate here that goes the full length of the car, and it sits underneath of the wheel, so it forms the bolster for the trucks. And the coupler sits inside of a little mounting box in here. And this I found to be a very reliable system. And the couplers, they respond quite readily when you install those. Now, as far as locomotives go, and most HO cars these days, they have a mounting box built into them, so that you just literally drop the coupler into place, pop on the cover plate and screw it down, and that's all there is to it. And the coupler sits in there. You can take it apart if you need to do any kind of maintenance work on it. And it's a very good mounting system and very reliable as far as I've been able to tell. This is a Stewart Bowser locomotive, and you can see here it's got the same type of mounting box with a plastic clip type holder right here. And I've not had any problems with these. They seem to hold fairly well, fairly reliably. Jumping across the pond, typically what you have seen in the past over there is this type of system. Okay, these are called a tension lock coupler, and you know, there's nothing that looks like that prototypically. So for anybody who says that a KD coupler doesn't look prototypical, take a look at one of these things here. They're almost as bad as the old US NMRA type horn hook coupler, which I have thrown every one of them that I've ever had away. So I can't even show you one of those. But at any rate, these things, They come two ways, and they're pretty much the standard still for what comes on UK equipment. And this one, it's a Bachmann car made in China, and you can see it's body mounted, so it sits right on there. And what I do in order to replace these, though, is I just take a knife and cut these off and body mount KD couplers in their own little boxes. Okay, so these are a number 5 KD draft gear box, and the KD itself, I'll show you. You just drop this spring mechanism, it's a bronze spring device, in place over top of the centering nib there. And then the coupler just fits right in place there inside that little spring. And then the draft gearbox here goes in place on it. Okay? So you've got this nice little mechanism here, and then you can typically you put a screw right through this hole here that goes up and body mounts them. Now, in most cases, what I do is, if I'm going to be using a draft gearbox like this, I'll just drill a hole in the bottom of the car and install a 256 screw through this hole, and that holds it in very well. You can also glue these together with liquid styrene cement applied around the edges here, and you could even glue this to the bottom of the car. But as you know by now, I like screws, and I don't trust glue. So typically I always body mount these using a screw. And they fit nicely up underneath of a car. So this is one that I've done on one of these Bachmann wagons. And you can see that I've installed the coupler here underneath of it. And in this case, as a test, I have just used liquid styrene cement to hold the coupler draft gear box in place. So we're going to see how this holds up. I did not go ahead and use screws because there's very little room to run a screw up through here without it ended up inside of the floor of the wagon itself. So that's something that you'll have to resolve yourself as far as whether or not you want to run a screw up into the bottom of your cars or not. But that's basically the only choice you have, is either to glue it or run a screw through and up into the to the bottom of the floor of the car. But that's one way to retrofit older equipment like this one here that has the old tension lock couplers body mounted. Now, most of the North American rolling stock these days comes with a draft gearbox built into the bottom here somewhere and somehow, and then a cover plate that fits over it. Sometimes they're screwed on, sometimes you glue them on, sometimes they have a press fit projection that goes up into a slot here in the bottom. And that holds the coupler in place. And it does a very good job here. I don't like the ones that you glue together, because that means you can't take it apart and work on your KD coupler easily. You have to basically break the draft gearbox in order to get it apart again. Now, as far as the current UK design, what they're using is this Neem coupler box. And you can see they vary a little bit here. But basically, this is the mounting area here in both cases. This is a Bachmann, this is a Dapple car. And basically, they use these KD couplers. Okay, so this is one of the KD European couplers. And you can see it's got this little set of legs going back with a little clip here on the back. Okay, so you've basically got this little box right here. Okay, you can see I can get that into the picture with a little opening here. And then the coupler literally just slides right in there. So it's very easy to convert current production UK equipment, and I think it's used in many other European manufacturers, and it's a very easy system to use. And once you get them on there, they usually mate up fairly well. I'll show you an example of mismates in a minute, but generally they're at the correct height and everything. One thing about these, they come in different lengths. So the number 18 KD, and you can see this is how they come in their packages. Okay, so this is a number 18 KD European version, and it's a NEAM 362. So that's a standard for the European market, and the 362 just is the standard for the box. Okay, at any rate, you can see this is a number 18 size. They make a number 17, which has a shorter shank here, and then they have a 19 and a 20, which this shank here is progressively longer. So that allows you to adjust the coupler mounting for different car situations, because most of them, the number 18 does a very good job of spacing them out. You can see with the number 18, the buffers don't touch. And in a linear arrangement, that's what you want, because as you go around curves, and depending on the curves, and those buffers start to hit up against one another, you can have derails if the curves are too tight and the coupler shanks are not long enough. So if you have very tight curves on your layout, you might have to go to a number 19 or a number 20. If you like really tight coupled equipment like so, you could use number 17s. So that's one thing that allows you to make adjustments. Now, one of the problems with this system, though, is they do not have any way of adjusting if the coupler height is off, okay? Because these coupler boxes are usually body mounted. So you're kind of stuck with what you get in that respect. Whereas with KD couplers and a lot of the knockoffs, you have the coupler basically is what's called a center-mounted shank. And let me get one of these here. And you can see that the shank here attaches to the head in the very center of it. But they also make these that are called an overset, okay, and an underset version. So you've got here the coupler shank comes in at the bottom of the head, and then there's others where the shank is attached at the top of the head. So you can use that to adjust for whatever height you need. And this here is a Bachmann Easy Mate version of that, and this is the KD version, okay? So KD makes these, and of course Bachmann does, and probably some of the others. I'm not familiar with every one of these. Here's one of those built into a small coupler box. And KD has a wide variety of different types of mechanisms for installing these. There are just page after page. And one thing I recommend you do, go to the KD website and just look that up on Google, and it'll take you there. And they have a very nice PDF catalog that you can download that shows you all of the different types of shank arrangements and the lengths of these and the heights and everything you ever need to know about picking just the right coupler to go on your car. They also have ones that, this is the standard number 5 type of mount or shank here. It's shaped like that at the end to work with that bronze coupler pin or bronze spring that I showed you. They also make these, they're called a whisker version, and it's hard to see these, but basically they have these little whiskers or springs built into the sides of the coupler itself. So these can be mounted directly into a draft gearbox like this, or one that comes on any other type of car or locomotive, and that serves as the spring itself. So that's one way of doing those. These here are very common as well, this type of little whisker spring arrangement that's cast into the shank itself too. And I said those are the Bachmann Easy Mates. Among the knockoffs, the Bachmanns are probably the best in my experience. A more recent development are these number 58 type couplers. And this is a KD number 58. This is a KD number 5. So you can see here that the smaller head, it looks much more prototypical than this one here, the number 5 in my right hand. And, they will couple up, but I have found that they don't work too well uncoupling, in my experience anyway, using magnets. So, if you're in for prototypical reality, these are one way to go. If you're really into operations, I recommend sticking with the standard head size. And like I said, I have a whole box full of these little number 58s and the similar knockoffs. I've zoomed in close on this KD number 5 coupler. And what I want to do is show you how I go about preparing one of these for installation on my cars. Now, one thing I do like to do is give these a coat of paint first. And this has a roof brown paint applied to it. And what I do, I just mount these. I take a piece of cardboard and shove these into the corrugations, the holes in the end of a piece of cardboard. And then you can just spray paint a whole bunch of them and just give it a light coat of a brown paint to get that look of rust. And it also deadens the shine from the coupler spring. So you can see that there's no shine from that spring. Whereas if you look at one of these, you can see the shine on that spring, okay? If you give it a nice light coat, it will not interfere at all with the operation of the mechanism whatsoever. Okay, so one of the first things that I like to do when I'm getting ready to install a KD coupler is, and this is something that's been recommended, for years and years, is dress the top and bottom of the shanks, because these come painted and they also might have some flash left over from the manufacturing process. So if you just go over this, with a sanding block or a sanding stick like this one, you'll get it down to bare metal very quickly. You'll take off any areas of flash, and you'll end up with a very, very smooth surface that are going to respond very quickly and reliably when they roll over an under-track magnet, okay? So they're not going to give you any amount of resistance and any trouble at all. You'll get that flash off of there, and they're going to work great for you. So very often when you get these from KD, the trip pin will be bent facing at an angle down instead of being horizontal with the plane of the track and the rails. And that can be very important because if this hangs down too low, it can catch on road crossings and places where, two rails cross. It can catch on the top of the rail heads. It can catch, at frogs and in turnouts, things of that nature. So you need to make sure that this is properly set. This is a KD number 237 pair of coupler pliers. And for years, I used just a standard old pair of needle nose pliers. And then after, trying to fix bent coupler pins that I screwed up using those, I went ahead and I purchased one of the KD coupler pin pliers. So let me show you how these work. You simply take these, and you can see they are round, and then it's got a depression in here that this sits into. Okay, so that's the best description I can think of. At any rate, these are made for use with various HO sizes and O sizes. They're not for in scale. But at any rate, you just pop it in there, pop the coupler pin into that depression, and give it a light squeeze. Be very careful. You don't want to overbend it. It's easier to do it a couple of times and get just the right angle. And what you want to do, you want to come out so that the coupler pin here, the trip pin, is going to be placed so that it is, level with and on the same angle with, square with, the top of the rails and the top of any track magnets, okay? And that way it's not going to catch. So that's a very important step. Now, some of these coupler boxes that come attached to cars, you might find that it's a tight fit. And in those kind of cases, you have to go and be a lot more aggressive and thin that shank down so that the coupler will go ahead and move side to side when you install it. And also, that's one of those cases also where something like using one of these whisker type, and you can see the little whiskers here, I hope. At any rate, that's where using these whisker types can be a better fit in some cases, because the bronze spring may not fit in those low relief coupler boxes. Okay? So that's something that you might give some thought to as well. Now, this device here, I'm going to uncouple. This device here is a KD coupler height gauge. This one I've had since about 1980. They last forever. And it's all metal, so you cannot use this on a DCC track. It's made to go on the track so you can check the coupler height. The versions that KD makes now, I think they're made out of Delrin plastic or something, and they can be placed on, they are DCC friendly. And you can see when these are placed on the top of the rails, have this mounting system with these projections here so that it will fit right on top of your rail heads. So you pop that into place, okay, like that, and it sits at just the right height. And then when you bring your coupler up to it, you can see if they're at the exact right height. Okay, these two are perfect. The problem with this car here, though, is the trip pin has not been adjusted. So watch what happens when I approach. You see how the trip pin catches? Let me do that again. Okay, so the trip pin is catching right there. There's a little platform right here on the bottom. Okay, and that is set so that if everything is at the exact height and the trip pin has been adjusted properly, it will sit flush on this little projection here. If not, it will catch on the lip of it, and you need to adjust it. So that's how you tell. You can see that catching there. Okay, it finally bounced up and got in there. But that's one of those issues, okay? And again, all you have to do is make that adjustment like I showed you. And let me show you a couple of these UK ones. Here, you can see, this one goes in there perfectly. So that's a perfect height. Now take a look at this one. This is a Bachmann version, okay? And this is, by the way, I think this is the only set of cars. I have two of these, and they're both the same height. And you can see that the top here of the coupler head sticks up anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 above the standard coupler height. So this one is not a great one to take home, and I've got to figure out a way to fix that. I haven't as yet. I'm probably going to have to end up cutting the Neem coupler box off of this one and installing body mounts on here. So what I'm probably going to have to do to this to fix it is remove this little guy here, and that's easy to do. They pop, literally pop right out. I can body mount one of the KD draft gear boxes that I showed you right here, and then install a number 5 coupler in there. So you're not wedded to using these NEM KD couplers and coupler boxes like are shown here. Instead, and then another thing you can do in order to get the proper height is KD makes their draft gear, let's see, I can get this here, it's a number 211 draft gearbox shims, okay? And these look just like the draft gear boxes themselves, and they just fit right here on the bottom of the car, and then you install the draft gear box, okay? And you can add multiples of these to get the height to what you desire. And by the way, KD also sells the individual draft gear boxes and lids. If you have rolling stock like this one here that has, you know, trucks on it, they sell these washers. And let me get this in here. Okay, so there's a number 208 and a number 209, and these are red and gray insulating washers, and they come in 2 different thicknesses. And what you do with those is they get placed underneath of the truck itself, but okay, between the top of the truck and the bottom of the underframe and the truck bolster. And what they do is they just allow you to raise the height of the car itself a little bit, and therefore move the coupler up. If you need to drop the height of the coupler, then you have to go with using some of those overshank and undershank type couplers. Another thing that I always do religiously when I install couplers. I take some of my graphite, and this is KD number 231 graphite. You don't have to buy theirs. You can go down to the local hardware store and just get your Tubalube or any other kind of dry powdered graphite. And then basically, you just take that. I give it a little shake to break up any clots, but that can then just be puffed into, like that, the car, okay, into the coupler box. And then you just move the coupler spring back and forth, or the coupler side to side a little bit, and get that graphite distributed within the draft gearbox. That's the first thing I do after I install a new coupler in a car, because you want that graphite in there so that these are going to work very, very reliably. That's that, along with cleaning up the shanks with the sanding sticks. That's probably the best thing you can do to get very reliable operation. And then after that, then you start worrying about the height of the coupler pin and whether or not it is sitting at the proper height. And these kind of things you will do after the car is all put together and the couplers have been added. And at that point, then you can go ahead and check and see if everything is fitting properly and working together. And whether or not, like in this case, it needs to be adjusted up just a bit. So I'm going to take this one and add just a little bit of a tweak to that trip pin. Okay, let's see how that's doing now. Okay, so added just a little bit more bend to the trip pin, and it's still catching just a touch when it gets there. So let me go ahead. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a bend here. Okay. And now we'll see. Okay, you can see it went in that time without catching on the height gauge. Okay, so that's a good one. So that's going to work fine. Okay, and when it comes to the UK locomotives, the system for mounting the KD couplers is virtually identical to what is on the rolling stock. You can see it's got these same neem mounting boxes or coupler boxes. And, the standard number 18 KD coupler works very well in most applications. Sometimes you might find you need to use a number 19. I don't think I've ever used a number 17 on one of those. Virtually every one of mine have these number 18 couplers. Okay, so that's a very quick and easy conversion. And as you can see here, we can check the coupler height, and they made up perfectly, no problems at all. So it's a very quick, easy way of converting your locomotives and your rolling stock to KD magnetic couplers and getting just a perfect height. Well, I hope that those tips that I've given you on fine-tuning KD couplers will get you started with operating your trains in a prototypical way with very reliable uncoupling operations. It's fairly straightforward to install couplers on these cars, as I've shown you in this video. But getting them to work reliably takes a little bit of extra effort. And, as long as you do it, as you put the couplers into the cars and occasionally do some maintenance, well, they'll work for you very well with the magnets that I've shown you in previous videos. So that's it for today. On Friday, we'll be taking a look at installing KD electromagnets underneath of the rails. So come on back for that video. In the meantime, have a great week and be safe. Bye-bye now.